So I'm going to call up our next presentation, Purity and Potency, Credibility and Sustainability Through Quality Control. And I'll ask Rob McIntyre to come up and introduce our guest speaker.
First switching the slides?
Oh, there should be. I'll look for it.
Oh, that right there.
Oh, it's right here.
Good morning, Rob McIntyre with Salvation Botanicals. I'd like to recognize that we are on the territory of the Algonquin, and I'm honored to be a guest here. I think I've probably spoken to most of you, either at this conference or in Calgary. So Salvation Botanicals is, we're a licensed dealer under the regulated system. We've got analytical testing. We're a processor, pending final approval. We also have a hemp producer's license. We have a First Nations model where we're working a program with the Selk Nation on Vancouver Island and Chief Gordon Plannis there. And we also work very closely with craft growers. Our booth here is about Salvation BioScience, so a testing facility, all about quality in the finished product in the regulated system. So what we're doing here and what the whole purpose, I guess, of this conference is credibility. We're getting together, we're looking to produce products that are at least at the standard in the regulated system and perhaps even better. Generally, when we're looking to enter into this, when we're entering into this market, we often look at the key components from a company standpoint. You know, is it profitable? What's our return on investment? How are we controlling our costs? What's our branding? How are we going to raise the capital to get in? These are all great questions, need to be addressed, but at the absolute foundation of any successful business or any successful industry is going to be the product quality. Does it work? Is the efficacy there? Is it consistent? Is it safe? And this is what quality control is all about. So we'll run the definition. Quality control is a set of measures and procedures to follow in order to ensure the quality of a product is maintained, improved against a set of benchmarks, and that any errors encountered are either eliminated or reduced. So as we're making products as we're making cannabis products, mistakes will happen. Quality control is the set of guidelines that mean that we learn from those mistakes and that those mistakes don't end up in finished goods and in the hands of a consumer. So the very good news with quality control is that it doesn't matter why we do it. Are we doing it to protect the consumer? Are we doing it simply to be compliant with some regulations? Or are we doing it to protect ourselves as the producers? The good news is that it really doesn't matter. The result of a good quality control system is going to be that we establish credibility and we create an industry that can be relied on. Now, when we fail in quality control, the costs in dollar terms, huge. We've got Toyota had floor mats, 4.2 million floor mats recalled. Cost them $3.2 billion. Samsung Galaxy 7 with phones that explode. And even Barbie's not immune with lead in the paint. That cost them $50 million to recall 21 million toys. When we look in cannabis, we've had something similar. We have had recalls, we have had failures. Microbutanol is a pesticide that is widely used. It's widely used and it's approved by Health Canada. It can be ingested. It'll be on your tomatoes, it'll be on your apples. The problem is when you come to smoke it. Microbutanol on heat produces hydrogen cyanide, which We don't need to be too knowledgeable. Cyanide, not a good thing to be sucking in. How did the system allow this to happen? Well, the regulations at the time, originally, when back in the ACMPR days, it was really an honor system. As a producer, you had to sign a statutory declaration saying that you did not use any pesticides. What did we find? We had contaminants in the system. Moved to a system of self-monitoring. So now an LP would produce a product and test it themselves. Testing themselves, the quality control is under a lot of pressures internally. We still had contaminants in the system. There were recalls that affected 25,000 patients. This is in the regulated system. We moved to a system of third-party testing, and we've got compliance now. Haven't been any recalls on pesticides since we got the third-party testing. So now we've gone to a legalized system since October 17th. Is the system any better? Well, we've had, I think, 7 recalls there since regulation, covering everything from mold to mislabeled. Now, mislabeled could be a very small problem. There was one where a percentage sign was left off a label, but it's still a breach in quality control. We've got 14 batches that entered the system with record-keeping issues. We haven't received full information from Health Canada on what exactly that means. The most concerning, my eldest son is on CBD for autism. The last 2 recalls were THC products entering the system that were labeled as CBD. That's the scary one for me. So I'd say that not to say that the system is inherently broken, but to say that there is an opportunity. So to take a lead in quality control, to produce a product that is of a higher quality is totally doable. Meeting Health Canada requirements is just the starting point, but we can go much further than that. There is a credibility cycle where we do our actions, we produce our product, we get our results, and we earn credibility. That credibility turns to opportunity, and that gives us the opportunity for bigger and better things. And it's on that basis that I want to introduce Dr. Stuart Titus. He's 10 years in the regulated CBD market in the US. He's been involved with startups. He was a previous Wall Street bond trader, but now reformed, and has worked as a physiotherapist with over 40,000 patients. He's the CEO of Medical Marijuana, Inc., which was the first listed company, the first listed cannabis company ever. And I introduce him as a guide as to that credibility cycle. How can we use our actions to earn credibility, and what good can we do from that credibility? So I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Stuart Titus.
Appreciate it so much. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to be here with you today, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here in our neighbor to the north, Canada, those of us from the United States. As Rob mentioned, I'm the President Chief Executive Officer of a publicly traded company in the U.S., Medical Marijuana Incorporated. Next month, we will celebrate our 10-year anniversary. We've been a hemp and CBD company for the past 8 years, and we've had some very interesting experiences throughout the globe in terms of bringing our products to a wide range of individuals who certainly are helping to overcome some health and wellness challenges by using CBD. Now, let's see if I can do this properly. Our company has had a good number of firsts. I think one of the great things we've done in April of 2014 was legalize our hemp CBD products into the country of Brazil for the treatment of refractory epilepsy. This is the type of epileptic seizure disorder in children that is resistant to pharmaceutical intervention. The children still continue to have these seizure disorders, but it seemed that our products, natural botanical sourced CBD, was able to help these children and these families to overcome these challenges. Certainly, the country of Brazil had seen the tremendous benefits, and even though there were pharmaceutical alternatives, these alternatives were not working. Thus, they allowed the doctors in their country to write prescriptions and import by special permit our products. Certainly, over time, the program for the last almost 5 years has gone extremely well. We service a great number of families. Currently, the healthcare system in Brazil has become very progressive, seeing that many children had previously been on 10 to 12 medicines to try to control their seizure disorders, and found that with 1 or 2 meds plus CBD, all of a sudden they're able to effectively not only control the seizure episodes, but that many of the children are actually starting to develop much more normally. Better emotion, better cognition, better social interaction, etc. So with these benefits, and of course the cost-saving benefits as well, when you start to be able to remove 8 or 10 different medicines and still achieve very effective results with patients, of course, in a socialized system like Brazil, this has tremendous implication. February of 2016, we had to develop a special fully THC-free product to be accepted by the country of Mexico. Nonetheless, we went ahead and did this, and certainly this has been a great move forward. Having this particular product actually has allowed the World Anti-Doping Agency to recommend that, yes, athletes, professional sport and Olympic athletes can use CBD as long as it does not contain THC for professional sport and Olympic competition. We've also had some wonderful experiences in the country of Puerto Rico, where we currently have 12 product registrations, and then we've been able to legalize our products in the country of Paraguay as of May of 2016. Last year, December of 2017, 2 years ago now, we introduced our fully THC-free products into the European markets. We currently have one of our divisions, which is a multi-level marketing direct sales company, doing some great work over there, about 50,000 current brand ambassadors in the European Union offering and selling our products. Now, of course, we've had a tremendous amount of challenges throughout the years, but one of the things we've done over time is to really improve the quality of our products. We were the first ones to consider triple lab testing, for example. So we test at various stages of the production process. We certainly test our final product not only for its cannabinoid content to make sure that the THC levels are within the federal guidelines, but also in terms of pesticides, toxins, mold, heavy metal contaminants, et cetera, which can happen through the agricultural process. Certainly we're quite excited to be able to lead the industry in many ways to these high levels of standards. And that's one of the reasons I really wanted to explore going back to the year 2011, I believe, when I first came to Canada and met the group over at Salvation Botanicals, because Canada was so progressive in terms of their cannabis regulations, allowing the medicinal use throughout the country. And certainly we wanted to explore potential opportunities, partnerships, and I was very thrilled to have met the folks over at Salvation because they had this wonderful analytical laboratory facility where they could test for not only cannabinoid content, but also various toxins that can occur. And I was so impressed that I've become an investor, and certainly I've enjoyed my relationship with the group at Salvation, and certainly believe that they're going to hold the country to very high standards in terms of as standardized a natural botanical product as can be possible. Now, certainly, I did mention some of the toxins and other potential negative effects that can happen through agricultural process, including pesticides, heavy metals, as we mentioned, et cetera. But also we're interested, of course, to test for the beneficial plant compounds. And the cannabis plant family is widely expressed with these amazing chemical compounds. You have now, I believe, 146 identified cannabinoids. We have a tremendous amount of terpenoids. We have flavonoids. And certainly these combinations are going to, I believe, develop a wonderful future, kind of bringing us back, if you will, 200 years to when all the doctors of the world were really botanists, because all their medicines truly came from plants. And today, of course, we do have a tremendous amount of pharmaceutical medications on the market, but nonetheless, even though back in 1986 in the U.S. we had an FDA approval of a synthetic THC. Back then, it was known as Marinol. Today, it goes by the generic term dronabinol. And even though this is FDA approved in the U.S. and patients can go to their doctors and get a prescription for this particular medication, patients, by and large, would rather spend money, take their time, go out of the way to a dispensary to purchase the natural botanical form of cannabis because it works so much better for them. Of course, you have all your entourage botanicals. You don't have the negative, unwanted side effects of the synthetic cannabinoids. And certainly, we're quite excited about bringing back the natural botanical form of cannabis as a true medicine where it naturally belongs. Now, around the globe, there's a tremendous amount of research being done on cannabis, and particularly we're very interested in the CBD side. Certainly, this is a very growing market sector. In the U.S., we estimate that the total overall cannabis market in the U.S. to be $120 billion annually. This is from the legal sales in markets such as Colorado, Washington, even California now, as well as the illegal illicit black market. And this year, 2019, Forbes mentions that the CBD market is expected to be $1.2 billion. So in essence, the CBD market only represents 1% of the overall cannabis pie. Nonetheless, this is a growing sector, which we believe at one point might encompass as much as 40% of the overall cannabis pie as patients come to realize the fact that they don't necessarily have to get the high to get the health. It was a little disappointing to see this morning the wonderful health minister here, a beautiful woman, very well-spoken, but unfortunately, we haven't done enough in the industry, and particularly here in Canada, to educate these individuals about the wonderful health and wellness benefits of the non-psychoactive cannabinoids, particularly CBD. Our panel just before us mentioned, there was a mention of CBD potentially being considered like a vitamin, and truly we believe that these non-psychoactive cannabinoids in particular provide essential and vital nutrients that are necessary for the optimal health and functioning of the human body. There are a wonderful series of doctors, particularly Dr. Ethan Russo, who first postulated this syndrome, this medical syndrome called clinical endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome, and certainly this has gained much more credence and popularity as time has gone on. But back in 2003, Dr. Russo, a very well-trained clinical neurologist, was seeing many patients come into his practice with very difficult to treat medical conditions. Things such as fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, migraine headaches, types of digestive disturbances he hadn't seen previously. And he found that nearly all of these patients were deficient in their internal endogenous cannabinoids. And certainly we all have this amazing self-regulatory system called the endogenous cannabinoid system. This was discovered in medicine in 1988, maybe the most profound discovery in the history of medicine. Very well under-recognized for its clinical significance, but nonetheless, we do produce our own internal cannabinoids. And even though we do this, normal enzymatic activity in our bodies generally degrades these internal endogenous cannabinoids very quickly. Thus, we need to supplement with plant cannabinoids. And it's very interesting to see that these health-challenged individuals that Dr. Russo was seeing in his clinic, once he got them on plant cannabinoids, they came to a much higher level of health and wellness and overcame a lot of their challenges. Certainly, there's been additional research over the years showing that the early onset of Alzheimer's and dementia is brought about by an endogenous cannabinoid deficiency. This was research in March of 2017, headed by Stanford University in California, and additional research going on in terms of digestive disturbances basically shows that the endogenous cannabinoid system is involved in the makeup of the actual gut lining. And if you're cannabinoid deficient, you can't really control intestinal inflammation. It's not till you get on plant cannabinoids that all of a sudden, many of these digestive disturbance patients are starting to overcome challenges. So around the globe, of course, there's a great amount of research going on in cannabis and cannabinoids in the CBD space, certainly in terms of epilepsy in the US. In June of last year, 2018, company GW Pharmaceuticals received FDA approval on their pharmaceutically developed version of CBD called Epidiolex. This is certainly available on the US markets now, generally runs about $36,000 a year. We've had 3 clinical studies done, 2 in Mexico, 1 in Brazil on our version of CBD, and certainly we believe that the natural botanical version, the way we've formulated, is actually getting twice, maybe even 3 times the average motor seizure reduction in these children. And, like I mentioned, these wonderful quality of life benefits that we're not really seeing with the pharmaceutically developed version. Other research, certainly the US government actually holds a patent on the therapeutic use of cannabinoids, this going back to October of 2003. The US patent number, for those of you so interested, is 6630507. The patent is titled Cannabinoids as Antioxidants and Neuroprotectants, certainly describing a wide range of potential therapeutic benefits. We certainly see in the Native American population in the US, I'm sure it's very similar here, that many patients have inflammatory related conditions, things such as heart disease, cardiovascular risk, diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis. All these patients go in to their doctors, have their blood drawn. Laboratory analysis basically shows these very elevated blood markers, if you will. And it's really interesting to see that over time, it's a good 6 to 12-week course of CBD therapy or cannabis and CBD therapy, that all these inflammatory markers start coming down to the much more normal levels. And this includes even your A1C marker in diabetes, or your ESR scores, your erythrocyte sedimentation rate scores in your rheumatoid arthritis patients. So we really believe that these cannabinoids, just on the antioxidant and the inflammatory side, have great potential benefit for the Native American population. And certainly on the neuroprotective side, much research showing great benefit for any neurodegenerative disorder. In fact, CBD has been shown to be a molecule that creates this concept of neurogenesis, or the regeneration of new, healthy brain cells, neurological pathways. Now, this has only been shown in rats in laboratory test setting, but nonetheless, we believe there's significant benefit for humans, and we look forward to being able to do much more clinical study and research as the US government has now allowed for a much more lenient posture and stance towards hemp and CBD. So in December 20th, actually, President Donald Trump did sign the 2018 Farm Bill. And just to touch on that real briefly, this basically separated out hemp from marijuana, which says marijuana and THC still remain in the Controlled Substances Act in the US, but hemp has been actually removed, and so have its derivatives, including CBD. So this will be descheduled by our US FDA, which will allow us to do much more clinical study and research. There's also been some nice research showing that CBD is able to target the mitochondria of the cell. Certainly for your fatigue patients, this has great potential benefit. We do see many patients after being on CBD for 3 or 4 days all of a sudden report, gosh, I have more energy. Particularly the fatigue patients, they feel like doing more housework or going out and walking when they might not have done that for quite a while. So it's very interesting that CBD is actually able to help generate, or at least help the mitochondria of the cells to generate these ATP energy reserves. And the corollary to that study is that also CBD does seem to be able to change the shape, the orientation, and the permeability of the cell membrane to allow for additional nutrients to come across and into the cell, particularly that of calcium. So there's great potential benefit for broken bones and osteoporosis. Some early stage startup research companies in the US are looking at these particular indications for pharmaceutical development. I can tell you we've had some very interesting stories with patients such as ones who have what's called osteogenesis imperfecta or brittle bone syndrome. These patients over a very short 6 months to 1 year period of time have seen incredible movement upward in their DEXA scan, bone density, bone mineral density scores, and certainly this is quite exciting. We're currently involved in some research on Parkinson's disease in the country of Brazil, Alzheimer's. Dr. David Schubert at the Salk Institute in San Diego, California, has basically shown that cannabinoids not only reduce inflammation in the brain, but also the buildup of the toxic protein called beta amyloid. This has great potential implications because, of course, this beta amyloid protein is the hallmark or the characteristic of Alzheimer's disease. In the US, there's also been some very early stage, interesting preclinical research on CBD and its anti-cancer effects. Dr. Sean McAllister, California Pacific Medical Center, has put CBD into a Petri dish containing metastatic breast cancer cells and showed how CBD causes a programmed cell death, what's called cellular apoptosis. And the way it does this is actually by switching off a defective gene called the ID1 gene. Another researcher, Dr. Robert McCallop, University of South Carolina Medical Center, has similarly put CBD into a Petri dish containing leukemia cells, and these obviously harmful cancerous cells. Again, were shown CBD caused this cellular apoptosis or programmed cell death. Here, CBD seemed to be activating certain enzymatic pathways, which allowed the body's resources to be able to recognize these harmful cancerous cells as true harmful invaders and thus cause this cellular apoptosis programmed cell death phenomena. In terms of neuroprotection, we're certainly excited. One of our pharmaceutical partners, Canada Life Sciences, with a license agreement from our US NIH to commercialize a US government patent. One of the indications is to treat traumatic brain injury, or CTE, which is certainly becoming the industrial disease of our US National Football League, and certainly soon to be considered the industrial disease of the National Hockey League as well. And of course, in terms of opioid addiction, some very interesting early research, but nonetheless showing that these cannabinoids have some great potential benefit. Now, a nice study out of Israel showed that a high concentration CBD formulation had a tremendous improvement in children with autism. And of course, we're seeing many epilepsy families with great potential benefit for their children with CBD products. And of course, many of these epileptic children also have autism. Thus, the anecdotal evidence of these parents has led to a certain amount of clinical research. And basically here, about 80% of the families reporting, this was a 188 family study, 188% of the families reported that their child had significant improvement by using this high concentration CBD form of cannabis. Another interesting article from Natural News basically shows CBD to potentially be used in the emergency room to fight the effects of stroke and cardiac emergencies. The US government patent back from October of 2003, the 6630507 patent, talks quite a lot about CBD, and particularly the fact that it does have some great potential benefit for these stroke cardiac patients, again, from the anti-inflammatory benefits. That patent also mentions that the non-psychoactive cannabinoids are much preferable to use over the psychoactive components because you can use a much higher dosing, if you will, without the intoxicating or the negative unwanted side effects. For example, my normal routine is I take 50 milligrams of CBD every morning and probably take about another 50 milligrams throughout the day and at night, so a total of 100 milligrams. Well, I can drive a car, I'm alert, awake, cognizant, and put in a good full day of work, but 2 or 3 milligrams of THC in an edible or something, and that gives me a psychoactive effect. I might even be asleep here on the stage. So that gives you a relative balance of why some of these non-psychoactive cannabinoids are so important. And really, even the World Health Organization in their meetings going back to October and November of 2017, the conclusion of these meetings on cannabis, and particularly CBD, were that CBD should not be a scheduled drug. It has no tendency for addiction. So hopefully we can move that dialogue a little bit further with some of the health ministers here in Canada to allow better access for us. Now, it's also interesting to note that opioid use in terms of drug addiction is much lower in the U.S. cannabis-friendly states. And we even see the incidence of opioid overdose death to be 25 to 30% lower in these states. And it's just presumably because patients are now able to combine a much higher dose of your cannabinoids with a much lower and safer dose of opioids to achieve effective pain relief. And certainly in terms of drug addiction recovery, a nice article here from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, Dr. Nora Volkow, basically showing that non-psychoactive cannabinoids, CBD, cannabidiol, may enable drug addiction recovery. Earlier, I did have a nice conversation with Dr. Turner. I believe she's from Manitoba, was talking about this nice study, which has been going on for a little bit now regarding mice in laboratory settings, but the fact that these mice are basically been programmed to be addicted to methamphetamine. And once these mice take a certain dose of CBD, all of a sudden their addictive tendencies to meth seem to vanish. Certainly this has great potential application for drug addiction recovery patients. Now, in terms of prescription drug use, it's very interesting to see that patients who get on a course of CBD therapy, on average, are on 2.8 pharmaceutical pills per day. After being on CBD for 3 to 4 months, the average pharmaceutical use goes down to 0.7 pills per day. Very interesting statistics. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you so very kindly for your attention, and I want to turn it back over to Rob at Salvation for some concluding remarks. It's been a wonderful pleasure to be here. I look forward to being in Canada much more, and certainly look forward to many more medical cannabis lectures and presentations. Thank you again for your attention.
Well, thanks very much, Stuart. I'm sure we'll have some questions on there. I think there were some more slides. Give me a second here. Well, you've heard all of the things that Stuart's been able to achieve with Medical Marijuana Inc. It all comes back to a very, very basic premise that they started with, which was producing a very good quality product. 0 recalls in 10 years, triple testing of the product when it's relatively an unregulated market at the time. So they've been exceeding the regulations and doing that with a real focus on making sure that the product worked, that it is safe, and exceeding the regulations. So how does that translate to what we're doing here? Well, we're looking to build an industry. Quickest way to kill an industry is to produce products that don't work or that are not safe. We have credibility has momentum. We start doing the right things, we do it in the right way, we keep doing them. That will open opportunities, and those opportunities lead to an industry that is supportable, stable, and will thrive. In quality control, what can we look at doing to raise the bar of regulation? We can look at the timing of tests. When do we test? I hear my product is tested. I hear it quite often. There's testing and there's testing. We've got to test for the right things at the right time using the right methods. So the testing, we can test a raw material to bring it into a production facility, into a processing facility. It may pass a pesticides test. By the time we extract, it may now fail a pesticides test. We may have a small amount of pesticides in the input material, but we may super concentrate that through the extraction process. So we need to have a quality control system that will identify that as soon as possible. We can look for environmental contaminants. If we're growing, we can look for before we even plant. Obviously, Stuart's focus is in CBD, and that's sourced from industrial hemp. Now, industrial hemp, and we've seen all of the benefits of industrial hemp of CBD, and that is probably a great way to build this industry. It's as a first step argument with our chiefs and council. It's very hard to refute industrial hemp as a very safe entry point into the regulated market. But environmental testing becomes really important. So we test the water, we test the soil, we test existing contaminants. That's all part of the quality control network. We even look at neighbors, because oftentimes it's not what you do, it's what your neighbors do that will impact the quality of your product. We need to not only test for contaminants, we need to identify them. There are some contaminants, some molds, that we can eliminate through extraction. Others we can't eliminate, and it's a failed batch. You need to work with your quality control people to maximize yields. We need to work through the process. How is the plant growing? How is it developing? At what time do you want to harvest? All of these things are part of our quality control network. Terpene profiles. It's not required by Health Canada. This is a test above and beyond the requirements, but it's very important. It's the terpenes that will regulate the effect that it has on the consumer. We look at, it sounds like a lot of testing, and I'm an analytics lab, of course, more testing the better. But if we're looking at the efficiency of testing, doing the right tests at the right times. Sometimes it's too early to do a pesticide test. You can do that later in the process. Again, part of the quality control network that you need to build up if you're going to be successful in the cannabis industry. The next step that a good quality control and analytics facility can provide to you is an interpretation of the results. It's one thing to get a result, it's another thing to have the explanation as to what it means. So, in summary, we're trying to create an industry. In order for that to happen, we need to establish and maintain credibility. We need products that work, that are safe, that are consistent. That builds credibility, and credibility is really the currency that will have the regulators sitting up and listening. It's critical to brand loyalty, of course, corporate profits, but it is the key to building an industry that is sustainable. Now, we can look at this regulation as a necessary evil, or we can view it as an opportunity. It's how we choose to frame it. And I'll leave you with the quote there. That credibility is a leader's currency. This is designed for an individual, but it works for a company. It also works for an industry. Credibility is a leader's currency. With it, you're solvent. Without, you're bankrupt. So I'd like to open the floor to any questions that anyone might have on quality control, perhaps for Stuart and his experience in the CBD market. Well, I'll leave you with that. We are at the booth. Thank you very much for your time. And again, I'd like to acknowledge just you turning up to this conference, and the actual conference itself shows a dedication to producing quality products that I think struck a note with the ministers this morning. So thank you very much.